House resumes and debate continues. But before I proceed, let me just, the Honorable Prime Minister called to be asked to be excused. To ask to be excused because he may not come back this afternoon because of the same flu. You know, so I just thought I would say that. I just remind the House that Honorable Senator George also wrote a letter in which he said most likely he might not attend, but I did not do it early because I'm not sure if he would have attended. So it would look like Honorable Oscar George also most likely will not attend Parliament. He was given leave of absence because he's ill, and the Prime Minister, so again, I like the respect that the Prime Minister is affording. He actually called me personally to indicate the situation. So I just want the House to be guided by that type of approach, you know, where we touch base, you know, and work as a team. Okay, let's proceed. House resumes, debate continues. Yes, we continue the debate, but the House continues. I think now we are supposed to be dealing with the overdraft. Yes.
Whereas, by virtue of Section 3.1 of the Loans Act, Chapter 6405 of the 1990 revised laws of the Commonwealth of Dominica, the House of Assembly may, by resolution duly passed, authorized by the Minister responsible for finance, to borrow money from approved sources or guarantee loans to statutory boards or public corporations for the purpose of financing general development purposes or for other purposes. And whereas, in accordance with Section 36.1 of the Finance Administration Act, Chapter 6302 of 2017 of the revised laws of Dominica, the power conferred by the Loans Act to borrow money by means of advances from a bank may be exercised by means of a fluctuating overdraft. And whereas, for the fiscal year 2021-2022, the House of Assembly approved an amount of $61,500,000 to meet central government overdraft requirements and guarantee overdraft facilities for some statutory bodies and public corporations. Of this amount, $56,500,000 represents the overdraft limit assigned to central government. And whereas the lingering impact of the prolonged COVID-19 pandemic on economic activity is expected to affect government's revenue for a third consecutive year, that is for fiscal year 2022-2023. And whereas there is a high level of uncertainty with regards to the impact of the Ukraine-Russia war on the local economy and revenue performance, the price of oil on the global market has been highly volatile, thus resulting in the governments having to implement measures to cushion the impact on local residents. And whereas this increase in the overdraft limit will serve as a buffer and offer flexibility in meeting government's short-term needs in a timely manner. And whereas the government of Dominica's debt strategy allows for a mix of financing options to include loans, overdraft facilities, and securities geared at meeting its debt management objective, and which is to ensure that the government's financing needs and obligations are met on a timely basis in a way that minimizes cost over the medium to long term with a prudent level of risk. And whereas the government of Dominica has utilized a combination of overdrafts and treasury bills to supplement general revenues to finance its short-term requirements and continues to finance its capital projects through grants, concessional loans, and resources from the Citizenship by Investment program. And whereas the government of Dominica continues to build fiscal resilience to these exogenous shocks and unanticipated shortfall in revenues, and the increased demand on the state to cover these unexpected events warrants the use of this facility. And whereas the government is also mindful of the ECCU target of having member countries meet the debt to GDP target of 60% by 2035. And whereas a sum not exceeding 103 million Eastern Caribbean dollars is required to meet central government's current overdraft requirements, and a sum not exceeding 5 million Eastern Caribbean dollars is required to meet guarantee of overdrafts to statutory boards and public corporations. Be it resolved that in accordance with Section 3.1 of the Loans Act, Chapter 6405 of the 2017 revised laws of the Commonwealth of Dominica, this Honorable House authorizes the Minister for Finance to borrow and guarantee by means of fluctuating overdraft a sum not exceeding in the aggregate 108 Eastern Caribbean dollars from A, the First Caribbean International Bank, B, the National Bank of Dominica, and C, Republic Bank, and or any other approved financial institutions to meet central government's current overdraft requirements and to guarantee overdrafts to statutory and public corporations for a further period of 1 year commencing from the first day of July 2022. Second, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Section 3.1 of the Loans Act, Chapter 6405 of the 1990 revised laws of the Commonwealth of Dominica authorizes the Minister with responsibility for finance to borrow money on behalf of government from approved sources and to guarantee loans to statutory boards or public corporations by resolution passed in this House of Assembly. Section 36.1 of the Finance Administration Act, Chapter 6302 of the 2017 revised laws of the Commonwealth of Dominica states that such borrowing may be exercised by means of a fluctuating overdraft. The Minister for Finance is therefore seeking the approval of this Honorable House for the use of an overdraft facility with the commercial banks in the Commonwealth of Dominica in the amount of $108 million. $103 million will be used to facilitate central government's operations during this fiscal year, and $5 million is required to guarantee overdraft facilities to statutory boards and public corporations. Mr. Speaker, the Government of Dominica's debt strategy provides for a mix of financing options to include loans, overdraft facilities, and securities geared toward meeting its debt management objective, which is to ensure that the government's financing needs and obligations are met on a timely basis in a way that minimizes cost over the medium to long term with a prudent level of risk. This applies to total public sector debt, which is made up of central government's debt plus guarantees given to public corporations, statutory bodies, and other state-owned enterprises in support of their borrowings. Over the past 10 years, government has been utilizing a combination of overdrafts and treasury bills to buffer temporary fiscal gaps, which may occur from time to time during the fiscal year as a result of delays in collection of tax revenues, unanticipated shortfall in tax revenues, or unforeseen increases in recurrent expenditure. While we continue to finance capital projects through grants, concessional loans, and resources from the Citizenship by Investment Program. Mr. Speaker, there is a high level of uncertainty with regards to the impact of the Ukraine-Russia war on the local economy and revenue performance. The price of oil on the global market has been highly volatile, thus resulting in the government having to implement measures, including subsidies, tax and licenses relief to cushion the impact on local residents. Mr. Speaker, though the government continues to build fiscal resilience to these exogenous shocks, the unanticipated shortfall in revenues, and the increased demand on the state to cover these unexpected events warrants the use of this facility. Mr. Speaker, this government will continue to exercise absolute fiscal prudence in the management of the country's resources and will pursue due diligence in ensuring that the country's financing needs are met without losing sight of the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union's debt to GDP target of 60% by 2035. I commend this resolution to this honorable House. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The motion is before the House for debate. Your mic. Oh. Yes, Honorable Linton.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. This request by the government side of the House for the House to approve an increase in the overdraft limit in this current fiscal year from 56.5 million in the last fiscal year to 103 million this year bears very careful analysis and assessment. Mr. Speaker, before I get into detail, I've come to expect that every time I stand in this House, especially at budget time, to ask the government to pay attention to its numbers, to ask the government to take responsibility for the numbers that it puts before the Parliament in terms of projections, revenue projections, for example, and to make the numbers make sense. Not just to me, but to the people of Dominica who you serve. The inevitable consequence of that is I get cursed out, I get maligned, I get called all sorts of names. Today was no exception. I was called out for, I was called out on lies that said I asked people for generator after Hurricane Maria. What did that have to do with the debate or the discussion or the closing of the debate? Absolutely nothing. But the Speaker's chair permitted it, as he's wont to do, because apparently the rules insofar as relevance is concerned, and the rules insofar as imputing improper motives, and the rules insofar as it concerns not using insulting or disrespectful language against members of the House applies only to us on this side. The members on the other side, I have come to accept and know that they can say what they want, they can do what they want. And I expect that when I make these few remarks this afternoon, people will jump up, and as usual, they will say what they want, and they will do what they want, irrespective of the rules, and the Speaker will have nothing to say about it. But, Mr. Speaker, this is a request.
Honorable Linton, again, you imputing improper motive on the chair. Because there are several instances where you are imputing improper motive on the chair. Because there were several instances from since last week in which I asked ministers of government to withdraw statements, and they did without hesitation. Every step of the way that I asked the members on the opposition side, and specifically some members, is serious hesitation. This morning, I asked the Honorable Reginald Austri to withdraw around about 2 or 3 times. He did it. No hesitation. You understand? Honorable Reginald Austri have his style. Sometimes it's stinging. But is his approach, it is the way he uses his words. I think you are being unfair to me. On your side, for example, I ask, and I allowed members on your side to have liberty. I pointed out, for example, there were instances of imputing improper motive, and I let it slide, even when a minister was standing up on a point of order. This is unfair, but I expect nothing less, so let's continue. Yeah, well, I could again, while the Honorable Lennox Linton was talking about relevance, I was asking myself. He was saying that members spoke and it was not relevant. But he, in his speech now, it was completely irrelevant to debate the overdraft. But I allowed it. No, Honorable AG, it's okay. Yeah, but I want to make that be clear. You cannot on one hand be saying something, you have to be consistent. In your deliberation, you are being irrelevant to the subject matter, but you bring me in it, and you think it is fair to me. But anyway, I expect that, so let's continue. Yes, yeah. Okay, thank you for saying you'll protect me on that side, yes.
I agree, Mr. Speaker, it's a big joke. It's a big joke. This business of relevance. We had a presentation this morning on the question of relevance.
Member, proceed, please. I said you can proceed.
I was just saying this business of relevance. I heard you muttering under your breath, Mr. Speaker, that it's a joke. Yes, it's a big joke.
Again, you were not paying attention. The Honorable Austri said he would protect me. So that was it. I don't know why you insist in trying to bring me in the debate every step of the way. I'm just there to rule, and then when I rule, we need to respect this. And Honorable John, I'm not going to tolerate these things from you, you know. From you. And you say I call you honorable again. You need to act as an honorable member.
I am. You act as an honorable member.
Honorable John, I will not accept any more comments like that from you anymore. This is not on the block. This is the Honorable House. So when the speaker is speaking, you are not supposed to be speaking. You didn't know that? You cannot tell the speaker what to do. Again, that is completely disrespectful. I would ask you, Honorable John, to apologize to the chair. And if you don't think you're going to leave the house without apologizing, we're going to take action on you today. I'm fed up with this nonsense. This has to stop, and I told you that in a bilateral. And you are doing it again, completely disrespectful. I also spoke, and I need to place it on the record. I spoke to the leader of the opposition about the behavior of Honorable Hector John. All members here saw what happened when the president was addressing the nation. Honorable Hector John had his back turned, complete disrespect, talking to other members there. I'm not going to tolerate that. I'm asking you to apologize to the chair. Honorable Hector John, the last time I'm asking you politely to apologize to the chair and for saying that the chair is mad. To ask you not to act a certain way. Yeah, you said that. You said crazy. Yes. Yeah, well, mad, crazy, anyone. So I'm asking you again to apologize. Members of the House seeing what's happening, you know. So I'm asking you to apologize. Yes.
But you know, I will not apologize for anything. I apologize and I move on.
Thank you. Honorable Linton, you could take the floor. Please proceed.
I sat in the House this morning, I heard a reference to one of the honorable members on this side of the House suggesting that there was some mental issue with that individual. I didn't hear any call for the Speaker for an apology or withdrawal of the statement. Anyway, Mr. Speaker, the overdraft request of this government is for an increase to $103 million, up from $56 million last year. I don't think the government has adequately explained why is that increase in overdraft necessary. And if we look at the performance of central government in terms of the current account balance, going back to the year ended June 30th, 2017, the year closed with a current account balance of $42.6 million. The approved amount was $36.5 million. So it was $6.1 million above the approved balance. The following year, the current account balance came back, the overdraft came back at $54.8 million. The approved amount was $36.5 million. And so in that year, ended June 30th, 2018, the balance was, the overdraft was $18.3 million above the approved amount. I'm going to skip the next year, which is 2019, and come to the year ended June 30th, 2020. That year, the government increased the overdraft limit to $56.5 million, and it closed the year within the limit at $52.8 million on the overdraft. So $3.7 million below the limit. The following year, ended June 30th, 2021, the year closed with the overdraft at $46.1 million, which is $10.4 million below the limit. And in the last financial year, which ended June 30th this year, the government tells us that it closed the year with the overdraft at $29.1 million, which is $27.4 million or 48% below the overdraft limit of 56.5%, or $56.5 million. Yet the government comes just a couple months after this wonderful performance of containing the overdraft to 27.4% below the limit. And it tells us we need to extend the overdraft this year to $103 million, up from $56.5 million. Mr. Speaker, there is no evidence presented to us in these numbers that the government needs this overdraft. For that five-year period that I spoke about, the years ended June 30th, 2017, 18, 20, 21, and 22, the overdraft came back at an average of $45.08 million. So if you had a limit of $56.5 million, you would be well within that. But Mr. Speaker, there was a problem year when On June 30th, 2019, the government's overdraft ended the year at $187.8 million. Again, $187.8 million. The limit at the time, the overdraft limit then, was $36.5 million. And so, the government spent, via overdraft, $151.3 million above the overdraft limit without the approval of Parliament. 415% spending above the limit of the overdraft to close the financial year ended June 30th, 2019, the middle of the election year 2019. Mr. Speaker, anywhere in the civilized world, spending in excess of the overdraft limit of $151.3 million is excessive, it's abusive, it is reckless. But this government says nothing about it. That's part of the utopia that goes on in this country. Nothing you do is worth questioning. I wonder why we come to this parliament. Because earlier today, I heard a whole set of told stories about what the leader of the opposition did and did not do in debate of the budget. He said nothing, but it took the Prime Minister 1 hour and 6 minutes, where the rules provide for 20 minutes. It took him 1 hour and 6 minutes to respond to nothingness. So there is an obsession on the other side with overdrafts. You all like to overdraw your accounts. The account for the Prime Minister this morning in terms of responding to the budget was 20 minutes. Close up the budget, 20 minutes. Where did he go? His overdraft was what? 46 minutes, more than double the amount of time he was allocated under the rules. He overdrew his account by more than 200%. I mean, come on. So, Mr. Speaker, the problem is not so much what the government has done in recent years, because, like I said, the overdraft looked pretty good at the end of last year. But we know what this government is capable of when you look at the $187.8 million spend in the above of $187 million overdraft that they closed the year with in 2019, which was $151.3 million, 415% above the limit provided by this parliament. And if you can do that, and not have to say anything about it, one wonders, why is it we even bother to come here? Because next year you could come and say, well, yeah, you had a $103 million limit, but you spent $250 million, so what? We had Ukraine to take care of, we had COVID-19 pandemic, we had all these things to happen, and therefore, why should anybody question us and what we do? The government had an opportunity, because I see here, it's indicated that as a result, let me quote, whereas there is a high level of uncertainty with regard to the impact of the Ukraine-Russia war on the local economy and revenue performance, the price of oil in the global market has been highly volatile, thus resulting in the government having to implement measures to cushion the impact of local residents. But what does this $103 million overdraft have to do with measures to cushion the effects of the Ukraine war? You just ended a budget debate. The estimates of expenditure are now approved by this parliament. And in the expenditure for next year, there is nothing to do with any relief. for struggling, poor, suffering people of Dominica, people struggling with high prices for food and clothing and shelter, people struggling with high petrol bills. The relief measures we're talking about, which are referred to here, are restricted to 2 items. Number 1 is the removal of the fuel surcharge on the removal of VAT on the fuel surcharge component of the electricity bill. That's number 1. And number 2, there is a reduction.
What is the relevance of this argument? The budget debate, as far as I consider, is closed. We are on overdraft.
Yes, Honorable Linton, in terms of, touch it. Honorable Linton, your mic need to show green. Yeah. Yes, point out, well, the minister stood up on a point of order in terms of relevance. So you just need to respond to this. What is the relevance in regards to?
Mr. Speaker, let me invite the member, the Minister for Tourism and International Transport, to read the motion now before this Parliament for the authorization of an overdraft, and to read page 3, full paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4 on page 3, where it says...
Start the preamble,
Huh?
Start the preamble, so we know exactly when.
No, well, it says, Mr. Speaker, I'm just drawing attention to the relevance.
Yeah, we have different page numbers, so I tell you, read.
Page 3.
So just start the preamble of what section?
Yeah, it says, and whereas there is a high level of uncertainty with regards to the impact of the Ukraine-Russia war on the local economy and revenue performance. The price of oil on the global market has been highly volatile, thus resulting in the government having to implement measures to cushion the impact on local residents. I am asking, Madam Tourism Minister, what is the relevance of the $103 million overdraft to these relief measures that you say you're providing? Because as far as the budget is concerned, which is now approved, there are 2 items in it. Can you?
No, he can proceed. He have just pointed out what is his relevance. So proceed.
By the way, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to congratulate the Minister for Tourism and International Transport because she made a number of very generous references to me in her debate contribution.
Honorable Linton, you cannot go back. You cannot go back.
Nobody would be remiss
No,
of me
you cannot. No,
but
you cannot.
Mr. Speaker, please, it would be remiss of me not to congratulate her because she did it at the risk of offending her leader, whom she referred to much fewer times than she referred to me, and I got concerned, Mr. Speaker, just in the very unlikely event that she served the jealous master.
Yeah, proceed.
So, Mr. Speaker, so the relevance. And, Mr. Speaker, of course, I believe that this overdraft that the government is requesting, this increase in the overdraft that the government is requesting, is totally unnecessary. It's totally unnecessary. The government can do with the $52.5 million overdraft that it operated with last year successfully, and the year before that successfully, and the year before that successfully as well. Except that the government may be planning some massive spending above the overdraft limit, like happened in the case of the 2019, when we saw this whopping $153 million above the budget. There was no COVID at the time, above the approved limit. There was no COVID at the time. There was no Ukraine war, you know, and yet we saw this aberration, and we're wondering whether we are in the season to expect another of these aberrations. Mr. Speaker, our role and responsibility in this Parliament, insofar as it concerns oversight of public finances, is to make sure the checks and balances are in place and to appeal to good sense and prudent management of financial resources, that we don't pander to excesses. And this $103 million overdraft in the circumstance of Dominica is pandering to excesses. Mr. Speaker, the other thing is, over the last few years, these overdraft facilities have come largely from the National Bank of Dominica, in which the government is a major shareholder. But of course, there are other shareholders in the bank, and I don't know what effect this $103 million overdraft is going to have on the operations of the bank. I don't know whether the bank is going to buckle or is going to come under stress, or the effect of the $103 million overdraft will be to crowd out private sector operators looking for a little $500,000 or $250,000 overdraft. I don't know what is going on, simply because we have not seen financial statements from the National Bank of Dominica since 2021. So we don't know what's going on there, Mr. Speaker. The 2021 financial statements of the bank are yet to be released. So we don't know what's happening there. And we're being asked in this Parliament to increase the overdraft of central government from $56.5 million to $103 million at a time when we hear all sorts of concern about non-performing loans and all of that. Mr. Speaker, the other reason why the government doesn't need any overdraft is because of what the government has told us over the last 3 years about its revenue performance. Yes, the traditional sources of revenue have been suffering, and some people say it's because of COVID, it's because of the Russian-Ukraine war right now, it's because of the hurricanes, etc., etc. But the situation facing Dominica does not seem to have impacted the inflow of revenues from Dominica's Citizenship by Investment program, which in 2021, close of that financial year, 2020-2021, reported revenues of $448 million. And Mr. Speaker, it's important I refer to this because I mentioned it in the budget statement, in my budget statement, as a concern and as a question. The question was totally ignored.
8 more minutes.
In favor of telling lies about yours truly. So I'll say again, Mr. Speaker, in terms of the revenues for 2020, 2021, and the audit confirms, the Director of Audit report confirms for that year that the revenues from Citizenship by Investment were $448 million. In that $148 million, there is an amount of $360,796 collected for certificates of naturalization. Each certificate of naturalization brought into the revenue $679.23, which means 531 citizens were responsible for this $448 million, meaning each of them contributed an amount of $843,333 or $310,403 from a program.
Yeah, Honorable Member, what is the relevance?
I'm coming to the relevance, Mr. Speaker, because if your revenue performance is as good as it is, if you are magically generating revenues above and beyond the capacity, the maximum capacity of the schemes that you're operating to generate those revenues, then you don't need any overdraft, because magicians in government don't need overdraft. You need checks and balances, okay? And I'm saying, without more, You have to be involved in some kind of magic to be able to generate revenues into the government operations at $310,403 per citizen, when that program only allows you a maximum of $109,950 US. The same thing for this year just ended, 2022, June 30th, 2022. We are told that the government raised $452.7 million from 285 citizens, which means $1,586,955 per citizen, or $584,105 US per citizen, from a program that can only generate at the maximum level $109,950 US. There has to be some magic involved, without more. This is why we're asking for an explanation, which you have not given. All of the members of the other side stood up. They spoke. They said all sorts of things about Lennox Linton, but these are the questions he raised in the public interest, so you can get a chance to explain to the public what is going on. You've refused to do that. You have just said he do a kind of a mathematics there. Well, you have the right mathematics, so present the right mathematics. You have all the brains. You run Utopia in Dominica. Give us the correct mathematics, because if your program is only able to deliver $109,950 US per citizen, how are you telling me that you're getting $584,105 US per citizen for the year ended 30th of June, 2022? And how are you telling me that in this coming financial year, where you're asking for an overdraft of $103 million, that you are going to be generating revenues of $492.2 million from 310 citizens? Do the math. You have calculators.
4 more minutes.
You have the brain that God gave you. You have computers. Do the math. How is it possible to generate $583,699 US in 2022-2023 from a citizenship by investment program that at best can only deliver $109,950 per person? How is that done? Do the math. Everybody looking dumbfounded. Everybody looking at it that they don't understand what we're talking about. These are your numbers. These are your numbers. These are your numbers. And these numbers make absolutely no sense. And none of you are brave enough to present what the right numbers are. Because these are the numbers from the estimates that you have presented to the House and which now stand approved by the Honorable House. So I want you to contradict them, because they make no sense. And they put us in a position where we may well have a risk in our revenue generation for the upcoming year, because 55% of the revenues of central government in the upcoming year, as it has been for the past couple of years, 55% of those revenues will come from the Citizenship by Investment program. And Mr. Speaker, again, I ask for an explanation of these numbers that are not Lennox Linton's numbers. These are the numbers that have been presented to us here in the Parliament. And I heard the Prime Minister say how long in advance you all had the estimates available, and how long you all prepared and consulted, and how long you all had his budget statement and so on, compared to us on this side who had it from a limited time. But Mr. Speaker, the numbers must make sense.
1 minute.
Otherwise, we come across to the rest of the world as not being serious. We have situations in this country where under laws, we ask people to explain the income or the money that they bring into us. You go to the bank with $1,000 US, you want to change it, they want to know where you get the money from. Similarly, the government has a responsibility to explain where its money is coming from. If your Citizenship by Investment program is only able to give you $92 million by way of formula, where is the other $399,477,781 coming from to make up the $492.2 million that you're projecting to raise in this financial year? Let the numbers make sense, for God's sake. And stop cursing Lennox Linton. He's asking you questions about what you have brought to this parliament.
Time up.
Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to make a brief contribution to the request for increase in the overdraft. And Mr. Speaker, it will be very brief. The way the Honorable Leader of the Opposition has spoken, you will see and say that the overdraft is additional money the government have. We're going to dip our hands in it we're going to just put our hands, take money, Mr. Speaker, and just spend carelessly, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this government has a record of prudently managing the affairs of this country. And that record, we have been given commendation by all international institutions that we do business with. Whether it's World Bank, whether it's CDB, we have been given commendation for how well we manage our economy. Mr. Speaker, this government went through Hurricane Maria, Mr. Speaker. Every village in Dominica was affected by Maria, Mr. Speaker. Every road was cut off. 99% of our housing stock was either totally destroyed or damaged. 226% of our GDP was damaged. How does Mr. Honorable Linton expect a small country like Dominica to have risen so quickly in 4.5 years if we did not have the means to access funding, Mr. Speaker, to respond so quickly? Thankfully, Mr. Speaker, at the time, as the Prime Minister said, we had savings because we have been so prudently managed. We were putting money aside. So in the CBI account, had savings which we could use to clean up our roads and to get things going whilst we were out there trying to raise funds on the international market. And Mr. Speaker, you know that, as it rightly says, an overdraft is used as a buffer to offer flexibility. So it's almost like bridging financing. Whilst you wait for other funds or loans you've contracted to come in, you have something temporary you can go to. And you, the honorable member, knows in 2017, we negotiated money for agriculture, for restoration of livelihoods and housing from the World Bank. When did we receive the funds? So if we had sat down as a government and said, well, until the World Bank money comes, we cannot do anything. I was going to say, true pull for the people of Dominica. Let them scrunt. Let us not do housing. Let us not clean, what is it? Kaipul Kwaze. Let Dominica fall. Let us not clean the roads. Let us not repair bridges. Let us not repair homes. Let us not pay our debts because we're waiting on money from international institutions. What did we do? You use the resources you have access to locally in the interim. You help yourself. You don't stay underwater and say, my house has fallen and that is it. But that is what the opposition that they wanted to happen in Dominica. That the government washed its hands after Hurricane Maria and said it is over. And that is what people thought in the international community, that Dominica would not be able to recover. But thank God, Papa Bode, there is a God that loves Dominica and understands the heart of the Prime Minister and this government. And we were able to, in 4.5 years, to restore this country that many people cannot believe Hurricane Maria, Category 5 hurricane, passed through this country, Mr. Speaker. So when he's talking about overdraft went up in 2019, and the way he talks, Mr. Speaker, when you have access to financing, the year ends at June 30th, 2019, but you use the money throughout. So prudent management, when the funds come in, as I said, is a bridging financing gap. You get money, you pay down the overdraft. Because overdraft is meant for a temporary measure to get things going, to provide you, to handle your affairs, whilst I said you're waiting for the other funds, which you will promise or you loaned or contracted, or waiting on revenues, Mr. Speaker, to increase. And Mr. Speaker, the report shows that during COVID-19, we were on lockdown, Mr. Speaker, the country was shut down. Tourism went flat, decimated. The worst hit on the tourism industry. All sectors in the country were closed, Mr. Speaker, and we were at our homes, Mr. Speaker. And at the same time, we still have to pay all our expenses, we still have to pay salaries. Why is the country not making money? The government still have to be expending funds, and funds to battle COVID-19. So what should we have done? Said revenue down, we don't have money, we cannot address the COVID-19 pandemic. You use your interim facilities to be able to respond quickly. That is what a responsible government does. So to come here and say we are responsible because we're asking for increasing the overdraft is careless and reckless of the opposition leader. Seeing the number of challenges this government had to deal with, from Erica to Maria to COVID-19, and to act as if COVID-19 did not happen, and probably for them it didn't, because they are nowhere to be found, neither after Maria and neither for COVID-19. We got vaccines to try to see if we could get our people vaccinated so they could be healthy and safe, Mr. Speaker, to protect lives. They went on the radio saying it's scary vaccine, don't take the vaccine, Mr. Speaker. So what happened? Some people foolishly listened to the advice of the opposition leader. And no, but you didn't go out on the radio telling people, encouraging citizens to take the shot. You have a responsibility to tell your people that we're in a pandemic, we're in a crisis, and we're trying to ensure that our people are safe. And we are the first country to receive a vaccine. How many of them you heard on the radio telling people to take the shot so we could reduce the spread of the virus, Mr. Speaker? None of them, they say, scary shot. Making people believe something wrong they were doing to take something to protect their health. So, Mr. Speaker, our numbers were going up and down. We had to retrofit the hospital. And I don't want to go over what Honorable Edwards said and the Honorable McIntyre said. But, Mr. Speaker, we had to spend over $60 million to battle the COVID pandemic. And during that time, every country in the world was battling with COVID. Right. Who could you ask for money? Everybody was dealing with a pandemic, worried about what was happening in their shore. Some people locked down their borders and they closed themselves in way after we opened up. Everybody was trying to maintain their little home front, Mr. Speaker. So where were we supposed to get the money from? We have to handle matters in our home front. So we utilized the funds at the National Bank so we could respond quickly to protect our people, Mr. Health and safety first, people first. And that is the difference between the Dominica Labour Party and the United Workers' Party. We are people first. We're not here for recognition. We're not there to be glorified. We are to do the people's business. And we always operate in the interest of the Dominican people. And that is why I know they get excited by the budget. They think it's an election. It's not an election here. The Prime Minister told you the number of consultations he's had with people around the country, 400 to 600. How many people has the opposition leader met to even discuss his budget and everything? That's why he has come to the House empty. And he wants to use the opportunity to talk on the overdraft to rebut the measures now. He had 2.5 hours to talk about the measures. He said nothing on them. But now we're talking about overdraft as a buffer in case of things, because, Mr. Speaker, we have this ongoing war. We don't know when it's going to end. We do not know, Mr. Speaker. We have to have flexibility if something happens, that we can respond to the needs of our people. The government has to have that flexibility. So to come there and act as if it's additional money we want to feed ourselves, that is nonsense, Mr. Speaker. And it is high time that the opposition of Dominica be more responsible in their statements in the House, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, with these few remarks, I want to support the overdraft facility. Mr. Speaker, the Dominican people are quite confident that Roosevelt Skerrit and the Dominican Labour Party government are quite capable of handling affairs. That is why in 2019, they voted resoundingly saying that it is safer with Labour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Member for Rosenhoff, my father told me, you're my cousin. And I met your mother when she joined us at a meeting some years ago, and she told me the same. So I'll be kind to you, but generally I am kind anyway. Mr. Speaker, I write in support of the resolution before us. And I want to begin by reading the preamble, or at least section of the preamble of that resolution. And it reads, I quote, "Whereas, by virtue of Section 3.1 of the Loans Act, Chapter 6405 of the 2017 Revised Laws of the Commonwealth of Dominica, the House of Assembly may, by resolution duly passed, authorize the minister responsible for finance to borrow money from approved sources or guaranteed loans to statutory boards or public corporations for the purpose of financing general development purposes or for other purposes." But I never understood why they had so many purposes. I think I saw it in the Parent Act. But, Mr. Speaker, the point I wish to make here is that the government or the Parliament authorizes the Minister of Finance, gives the authority to borrow for development purposes and other purposes. So I want to start with that because sometimes, and continuing on the debate we had on debt, and Senator Sanford misrepresented me this morning, and she said that I said debt was a good thing. I will not disagree. It is relevant to this, and just take your time. Don't get excited. Don't get excited. No need to get excited. But we're talking about an overdraft. The connection is so obvious, I don't even have to explain any nexus between an overdraft and debt. There's nothing to that, you know. So Mr. Speaker, and the point that was made about, you know, claiming that I said that was a good thing. I remember one member in the House said this, and I will not disagree, but I didn't say that, Senator Sanford. I didn't say that. But anyway, Mr. Speaker, the purpose of this resolution is to allow the Minister of Finance to borrow for development purposes. So we don't just borrow just because. You borrow for development purposes. So that's one thing. But I just want to say in my brief contribution on this resolution, Mr. Speaker, is just to highlight something that the leader of the opposition opened that discussion, and I felt compelled to respond. Because he brought to our attention that we should way over the overdraft in 2019. It came to $187,757,984. That is true. That is true. But by 2020, we paid down how much? About 50-something million dollars down on that. We took it down to $133,887,894. In 2020, half of that year, well, at least a quarter of that year, really, fiscal year, talking about, we were in the throes of the COVID-19 pandemic. Yet we were able to bring that overdraft down by $54 million. So I don't know what all the excitement is about. But Mr. Speaker, by 2021, we brought it down to $116,460,710. That's a significant reduction. So during a very difficult time in the midst of a pandemic, check it out. 187 million all the way to 116 million. But we didn't stop there. And that is the kicker for you, Leader of the Opposition. You mentioned you were kind enough to take us back to 2019. But why are you not talking about 2022? How did we end the financial year? I mean, how did we end the fiscal year? And all of us have a copy. All of us have a copy, and you could check it out. It's on what page? It's page 5. If you're kind enough to go down to the National Bank of Dominica. And you can check. It says bank overdraft facility. 29 million. 29 million, $65,084. So no, but he said it in a way. He said it in a way that he failed to make the comparison that we took it from 187 million, brought it to 29 million. And here is the answer to your, no, hold on. Don't get excited. Getting back to the point you were making, why then do we need it? I'm going to tell you why we need it. Let me tell you why we need it. And let's go to the same resolution before us. I'm going to read it for you because I want the public to know why we're taking an overdraft. So if you go down, and whereas this increase in the overdraft limit will serve as a buffer and offer flexibility in meeting government short-term needs in a timely manner. So we're in the middle of a hurricane season. God forbid we get hit by a hurricane. What do you want us to do? What do you want us to do? So we need the flexibility to ensure. So to answer your question, then why don't we stay below? And you did some comparisons, and I will respond to you on that. Why then? It's because we want to ensure that we can continue operations. Flexibility that is required. Yes, the CBI is a major revenue, earner, an inflow of cash. But there may be times when it may not be flowing as quickly as it should. And therefore, we need the buffer. You need the bridge financing. You need an opportunity to ensure that you have no delay in the execution of projects and programs that are provided for in this year's estimates. And this is why we need this. So this is very important. But I want to go on to say a little further. I want to go back. I want to go to something related. And I know the members of the opposition will not get as excited. But I will ask, Mr. Speaker, to allow me to make a comparison. And I want to go to another section here before I refer to it. And whereas the government of Dominica has utilized a combination of overdrafts and treasury bills to supplement general revenues to finance its short-term requirements and continues to finance its capital projects through grants, concessional loans, and resources from the Citizenship by Investment Program. So this is just really a guarantee, an insurance, something to keep there. So in the event that all these other sources of revenue may have some delay, some shortfall, that we have the space, Mr. Speaker. And staying within a tight limit will not allow you to do that. Because once the maximum is set, then we are constrained by that. But I want to make this comparison. Because interestingly, by 2000, Dominica started growing, and our gross domestic product, going back to that, was about $230 million. That was what our GDP was. By 2000, it moved up to 333. And now it is 545 million EC dollars. Now, even if you were to go back and take in account inflation, Dominica has grown significantly. We are now with an estimate talking about $1 billion. Recurrent revenue and capital, $1 billion. What you come and tell me you're going to have a $35 million overdraft? What is that? In the scheme of things, what is that? And not even taking into account inflation. I mean, how do you do that? You cannot responsibly manage a country and limit yourself that way when everything around you is moving. We have moved away from budgets of $200 million, $300 million, and now you're talking about $1 billion and you're making that an issue? And the government has demonstrated its ability to pay down on this overdraft. So when we consider all of this thing, and I want to give you a little one again before I take my seat, Mr. Speaker. Just to mention, I'm not sure what your question is, but I'm really not speaking to you. So, Mr. Speaker, another related matter I just wanted to share, because while we're on this debate, I wanted to share, for example, even our gross domestic product per capita. That is, when countries measure, it's a matrix that is used to measure how well countries are doing. Admittedly, I spend a lot of time at the UN arguing with my colleagues, joining my colleagues in arguing with the more advanced economies that it is not a fair measure of development, in that we are vulnerable. So it is not that it does not show that how you're developing, but it does not give the full picture. And it does not take into account vulnerabilities because we get hit by natural disasters. And therefore it pushes us back, sends us back. But one of the interesting things, in light of the fact that I mentioned our increasing gross domestic product, when we take it and we divide it by the population, and by the way, Dominica's population hasn't increased that much over the period on the review, and therefore it is not going to change. But interesting bit of information. Over the last 20 years, this Dominican Labour Party, led by Roosevelt, Honorable Roosevelt Skerrit, the member for Vega as Minister of Finance and Prime Minister, has double the gross domestic product per capita. So per person, we have doubled. So we moved from 3,700 plus US dollars up to, by 2020, we were 8,000 US dollars per person. That's how you measure development. That is how you measure how a country is moving on. But my brother, I just told it's not a perfect measure, but it is the best measure known at this time that tells you how well a country is doing. So you can talk, if you want to fight, as my good friend used to say, facts are stubborn things. So if you want to fight with the data and the statistics, go ahead and fight. But I'm just simply placing the facts on the table that we have seen a tremendous movement and growth in the economy. And therefore, there is no reason why we should remain with an overdraft that is so narrow and does not reflect the true development path that we are on as a nation. And that is the argument. It's a simple one. It's nothing to get excited over, but we need to ensure that we have a facility, and this is why I am in support of the $103 million that is being asked for, to ensure that we can finance any unforeseen event, and to ensure that, God forbid, we get hit by a natural disaster during the hurricane season, that we will have some resources that we can immediately rely on in addition to the other facilities such as the CREF, such as the CADDDO from the World Bank that was approved here several weeks ago, and that we can ensure that we can protect lives and ensure we can protect livelihoods and rebound very quickly. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Let me, in conclusion, thank the members who have contributed, and quite clearly so, Mr. Speaker. We've been coming here, Mr. Speaker, for years, asking for permission on the overdraft facility, and it's an annual requirement of this House that we get permission, Mr. Speaker. But we have shown by our reputation, Mr. Speaker, that we can manage the economy. And if you look at where we were in 2000, Mr. Speaker, and like some of my colleagues said, to where we are today, 20 years later, Mr. Speaker, we have grown the economy tenfold, Mr. Speaker. Where we met, the Dominica we met, and the Dominica we have today, Mr. Speaker, is evidence of an economy on the rise, Mr. In spite of all of the challenges that we have had, Mr. Speaker. We had Tropical Storm Erica in 2015, was it? We had Hurricane Maria. And like what my colleague said, Hurricane Maria totally decimated the country, wiped out 225% of our GDP. We had not even recovered yet. And the figures spell it out, Mr. Speaker. Because in 2019, we see, Mr. Speaker, the kind of spending that we had to make. Even 2018, coming out of Hurricane Maria, Mr. Speaker. And before we were back on our feet again, we were thrust right into COVID, Mr. Speaker. And today, we see where we are, Mr. Speaker. And I must say, everybody in this country, every right-thinking person in this country, even those who are looking at us, Mr. Speaker, like our donors, the IMF, the CDB, the World Bank, the European Union, Mr. Speaker, are constantly congratulating Dominica for the fine work that we have been able to do. I mean, Dominica is the only country outside of Barbados that the EU has agreed to celebrate EU Day, Mr. Speaker, and I've commended the minister and the government on the prudent management of the economy, Mr. Speaker, and we'll continue so to do. Because, Mr. Speaker, we know that an overdraft is like an insurance policy. You do not intend to use your overdraft, but you have your overdraft there just in case. And we have seen over the years what the just in case would mean, especially for Dominica. I don't think we should be having a debate about the approval of the overdraft facility in Dominica today, because we know, we have experienced shock after shock, exogenous shocks, climate change shocks, Mr. Speaker, over and over and over again, where we had to dig deep into our resources. Just this morning, the Prime Minister was talking about monies that we were actually saving, Mr. Speaker, saving for wet days. We've had to turn around and use it to keep the economy afloat and to keep us going, Mr. Speaker. So we know that we are on the right track, Mr. Speaker. I mean, after all of this, out of the blue, Mr. Speaker, comes the Russia-Ukraine war. And look at what the impact, because between Russia really produces more than 50% of the world's oil, and that has had an impact on fuel. Again, we look at wheat for an essential commodity like flour to produce bread, Mr. Speaker. Between Russia and Ukraine, again, they produce about between 75% or more of the world's wheat, Mr. Speaker. So that is an impact on the world over, and that is why we have to look inward, Mr. Speaker, to produce more of what we use, so we can depend on our own resources, Mr. Speaker. And thank God that we have had the CBI to bolster our resources, Mr. Speaker. And we have come here ad nauseum, Mr. Speaker, time and time again. We have said that there are different levels of CBI application. The applicant can apply for himself, and he can apply for his wife. He can apply for his wife and two others, Mr. Speaker, as his family, and there are different price ranges, Mr. Speaker. So the opposition cannot use every applicant. There's per applicant, Mr. Speaker, and they're looking at the amount of certificates and multiplying it by a per applicant fee. And we are at pains, Mr. Speaker. The leader of the opposition went last year from 1.2 billion, now he's at 4.6 billion, Mr. Speaker. And figures they know. Everybody in Dominica knows, Mr. Speaker, that those figures are wrong calculation of the scheme. And it is not us, Mr. Speaker. It is not the Dominica Labour Party that formulated the Citizenship by Investment program, Mr. Speaker. That program, Mr. Speaker, is a program that we met there and we made better, Mr. Speaker. And for 4 years in a row, Mr. Speaker, every single international institution have brought Dominica's program as the best program in the world for 4 years running, Mr. Speaker. So So it's not Dominica that's lying again, Mr. Speaker. It's not the Prime Minister. It's the international community, Mr. Speaker. 4 years in a row, our program has proven to be the best program. There are countries in Europe that they have shut down their program, Mr. Speaker, and Dominica's program is still running, growing from strength to strength, Mr. Speaker. I believe there's a saying that you mustn't look a gift horse in its mouth, Mr. Speaker. We must thank God and we must be grateful for the Citizenship by Investment program. And that principle, practice, and policy that the United Workers' Party have of constantly attacking the program, Mr. Speaker, you are going to kill the goose that is laying the golden egg. Mr. Speaker, and when a natural disaster hits, when a hurricane hits, Mr. Speaker, it doesn't choose which roof to blow off, Mr. Speaker. Roofs of labor rights are blown off, and roofs of United Workers' Party supporters are blown off, Mr. Speaker. Like Bob Marley says, when the rain falls, it does not fall on one man house top. And when you continue to jeopardize the fortunes of Dominica, when you continue to undermine the very linchpin upon which the economy sits, when you do that, Mr. Speaker, you undermine the very fortunes of our people. The people who are 70 and over, who depend on the little 300 to pay their lights and buy their groceries. The students who are doing well at school, whose parents cannot afford to send them to study, and the government can give them a scholarship. The people who are 70 and older, Mr. Speaker, and cannot go back into the bank and take a loan after the hurricanes and natural disasters have destroyed their homes, and the government have come in to build those homes back free of charge, Mr. Speaker. The persons that we have sent abroad to study and they have come back, and now we're trying to do the future housing development, Mr. Speaker. All of that, all of those fortunes will be undermined if we do not rise as statesmen. And when something is right and good for the benefit of our country, we must all, as parliamentarians, support it, Mr. Speaker. And that is our duty, and that is what we have to do, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I don't like to go back too far back, Mr. Speaker, but I am also a student of history. I study Dominican history, Mr. Speaker. And again, in 1999, when the 14% loan was taken in Trinidad at $140 million between August and September of 1999, by December of 1999, Mr. Speaker, that $140 million was spent. There was not $1 left in the treasury. And today, the leader of the opposition is coming here and talking about prudent management of economy, Mr. Speaker. I can stand here and speak without any fear of contradiction, Mr. Speaker, that this government must get an A+ for fiscal management in the Eastern Caribbean. I can say it, Mr. Speaker. We have already gotten it. We have already gotten it, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, everybody in Dominica today understands what this government is trying to do. Everybody today understands clearly what we're trying to do, Mr. Speaker. The facts are there. Mr. Speaker, time and time again, we come and we present the facts to the House, Mr. Speaker. You have the Public Accounts Committee, Mr. Speaker, who present the accounts. If the members of the government have questions, they can call Public Accounts Committee meetings, and the public servants are obligated by law to bring the evidence and bring the information. It is not hidden, you know. The Citizenship by Investment is not something that the Prime Minister have in his briefcase walking about, you know, Mr. Speaker. Every single fact about the program can be sourced by the members. But they are not interested in that, Mr. Speaker. They're not interested in that at all. But we will continue to remain focused on this side of the House, Mr. Speaker. Where we are today, we have absolutely justified our approval of the overdraft facility. And I will tell you, Mr. Speaker, that when we come back here again next year, we will have a perfect report card to report to the people. All we have to concentrate on now, Mr. Speaker, is execution and implementation of the government's plans and programs to continue to generate growth and development in this country amidst the total global challenges that we face today. Once again, Mr. Speaker, I thank you for the courtesy of your time.
This concludes the debate on the motion. I will now put the question. Be it resolved that in accordance with Section 3.1 of the Loans Act, Chapter 6405 of 2017 revised laws of the Commonwealth of Dominica, this Honorable House authorizes the Minister for Finance to borrow and guarantee by means of fluctuating overdraft a sum not exceeding in the aggregate 108 million Eastern Caribbean dollars from A, First Caribbean International Bank, B, National Bank of Dominica, C, Republic Bank, and or D, any other approved financial institution to meet central government's current overdraft requirements and to guarantee overdrafts to statutory and public corporations for a further period of 1 year, commencing from 1st day of July 2022. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
The following honorable members of the various undermined committees are nominated to serve. On the Public Accounts Committee, Mr. Speaker, we have Honorable Melissa Popon-Skerrit, member, Senator the Honorable Nicholas Esprit, and the Honorable Lennox Linton, the Honorable Clement Masley.
Yes, and the chairman?
And the chairman is the speaker?
No, the Honorable Lennox Linton.
Honorable Lennox Linton. Sorry, Mr. Speaker.
Second.
Honorable Lennox Linton. Second.
Second, Mr. Speaker.
It has been moved and seconded that the following persons serve on the Public Accounts Committee. Honorable Melissa Popon-Skerrit, Honorable Lennox Linton, Honorable Shanks Esprit, and the third one was?
Honorable Clement Masley.
Senator Clement Masley. Yes. Honorable Nicholas Esprit, and the chairperson, Honorable Lennox Linton. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, on the Privileges Committee, Honorable Joseph Isaac, Chairman of the Privileges Committee.
Yes, proceed.
And on the government side, Honorable Octavia Alfred.
Yes.
And Honorable Dr. Addis King, who serve as members.
Yes.
And Honorable Francisca Joseph, and Honorable Annette Sanford.
Yes. So, for Privileges Committee, the following people.
Seconded.
Seconded? Okay. It has been moved and seconded that the following persons serve on the Privileges Committee. Honorable Joseph Isaac, Chairman. Honorable Octavia Alfred, member. Honorable Addis King, member. Senator Francisca Joseph, member. And Senator Annette Sanford, member. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the following members serve on the Standing Orders Committee. Honorable Joseph Isaac as the chairman.
Yes?
Honorable Kozia Frederick.
Yes?
Honorable Fidel Grant.
Yes?
Honorable Danny Luge. And Honorable Ernie John Finn.
Mr. Speaker, I
Second? Yes. It has been moved and seconded that the following persons serve on the Standing Orders Committee. Honorable Joseph Isaac, Chairperson. Honorable Kozia Frederick, Member. Honorable Fidel Grant, Member. Honorable Danny Luge, Member. Senator Ernie Johnfin, Member. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I move the following members to serve on the Creed Parliamentary Oversight Committee. Honorable Levi Peter, Chairman.
Yes?
Honorable Oscar George.
Yes?
Honorable Kasani Laville.
Yes?
Honorable Francisca Joseph.
Yes?
Honorable Hector John.
It has been moved and seconded that the following persons serve on the Creed Parliamentary Oversight Committee. Honorable Levi Peters, Chairperson. Honorable Oscar George, Member. Honorable Kasani Laville, Member. Honorable Francisca Joseph, Member. Honorable Hector John, Member. The Parliamentary Proceeding and Broadcasting Committee.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the following members serve on the Parliamentary Proceedings and Broadcast Committee. Honorable Joseph Isaac, Chairman.
Yes?
Honorable Kira Lockhart Hippolyte, Member. Honorable Daniel Luge.
Yes? Okay. It has been moved and seconded that the following persons serve on the Parliamentary Proceedings and Broadcasting Committee. Honorable Joseph Isaac, Chairman. Honorable Shakira Lockhart Hippolyte, Member. Honorable Danny Luge, Member. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, let me thank each and every one of all the members of the House, Mr. Speaker, for very spirited proceedings that we have had. Let me also thank all those public servants who assisted in the preparation of the annual estimates. Let me thank the Clerk of the House and all of the support staff, the stenographers, the personnel from GIS, the security, the police, the Sergeant at Arms, Mr. Speaker, and you and all of the other persons who have quite skillfully helped us through GIS and all of the others who have assisted us in our work here and in the work of the people by the passage of the annual budget, Mr. Speaker. I hope that we can go out now, Mr. Speaker, and implement the work of the people, that which they have elected us so to do. Once again, I want to thank each and every one of us for the contributions made to this session of the House. I now move that this honorable House be adjourned, sine die.
It has been moved and seconded that the House be adjourned, sine die. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. House is adjourned, sine die.